Okay, we're gonna start on 2.6, and this is all about transformations of functions. So we're going to take a given function, and so the first type of transformation we're going to do is called the vertical shift, and the second one we're going to do is called a horizontal shift. So for the vertical shift, we'll do all of these by example first, and then we'll generalize it. So let's take the function f of x equals x squared. And this is a well-known function. We've done the graph earlier, and this is just a parabola looking like this. And we say, okay, well, we want to move this up. Well, how would we move it up? Let's take, I'll call this f1 of x. This is x squared plus 2. And you say, okay, well, how would I graph that? Well, if I plug in 0, so here in the original, let me plot some points just for it to be very clear as to what's happening. We have 0, 0, 1, 1, negative 1, 1, just as a couple of points as a reference. If we plot the same points here, 0, or the same x values, I should say, for 0, we would get 0 plus 2, which is 2. Negative 1, we'd get negative 1 squared plus 2, which is 3. Here we get 1 squared plus 2, which is also 3. Notice that the y values are just adding 2, which is clear. So what happens to the graph is the graph, here's 1, here's 3, here's a negative 1 and 3. The graph just gets bumped up by 2. So this graph is just f of x, you take f of x and move up by 2. Okay? In a similar way, if you take, we'll call this f sub 2 of x, if I had x squared minus 2, you would see what happens analogously. Well, if you plug in the same points, 0, 1, and negative 1, the y values would become minus 2, and here we would get minus 1 and minus 1. So we would have 0 minus 2, 1 minus 1, negative 1 minus 1, and the graph would look something like this. And this is simply the original f of x graph. So let me label this with a blue pen so that it's a little bit different. So this is take f of x and move it down by 2. Okay. So the general theme is, notice that f1 of x here, f1 of x is f of x plus 2, and f2 of x is f of x minus 2. So in general, the general pattern is as follows. General pattern. That if you're given a function f of x plus a positive number a, so we're going to assume here a is positive, then this is just, the graph is shift the graph of f of x up by a units. So this is the first item corresponding to the f1. And if we're given f of x minus a, where again a is positive, so you have, say, f of x minus 2, just like we did over here, then the theme is shift the graph of f down by a units. Okay, so this is the general theme for the vertical shift. If you're given a function and you add a number or subtract a number, then that simply moves the graph up and down. So just as a little exercise here, so graph, call it f1 of, well, let me use a different letter rather than f. Let's use f1 again. So let's say f1 of x is the square root of x plus 5, and f2 of x is the square root of x minus 5. So go ahead and graph these. So graph these thinking of them as shifts of some function f of x. Okay, so your job is A, to identify what f of x is, graph f of x. So your job is, so 1 is find f of x, graph it, and then graph f1 and f2. Okay, that's good enough for this video. We're going to do the horizontal shifts in the next video.